Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar audience. We would like to get our program started. We've got all the important people are here. So it's time to get the whole thing off on the road. So my name is Steve Vieweg. I serve as the Associate Director for the Center for Translating Research into Practice here at IUPUI. And we have this beginning portion of our program today on a webinar as well, which is why I'm standing over here. All of our speakers will have to be here so they can be seen on the camera, and our audience will be able to see what you're seeing as well. We have a lot of exciting things to share with you, but we're going to start with the most exciting thing you could ever imagine here in our campus, and that is for me to invite our interim chancellor, Andy Klein, to come up and give a warm welcome. So give him a big applause.
Oh my gosh, Steve has a low bar for excitement, doesn't he? Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the energy and commitment that you bring to the Center for Translating Research into Practice. Thank you for the energy and commitment you bring to everything you do. We really appreciate it. It is a pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon as we celebrate translational research on our campus, in our community, and all around the world. I'm delighted to welcome each of you. I am especially delighted to welcome Dr. Sandra Petronio and Chancellor Charles Bantz. Many of you in the room know that I worked for Chancellor Bantz for 3 years as his chief of staff. He is a role model, a mentor, and along with Dr. Petronio, a really, really good friend. So it's special for me to be at the podium with you here celebrating so much what you've done for our campus. Chancellor Bantz will take the podium himself in a couple of minutes, but I do have a few remarks to kick off today's event. You know, one of the images that many people associate with universities is the ivory tower, right? People imagine university professors as disconnected from the real world, pursuing their scholarly interests without much thought, sorry, my tie's all tangled, without much thought to the outside world or to society's problems. Well, you know, I'm really proud to say that that's not the case at IUPUI. You know, here at IUPUI, we very consciously build bridges between our research and the world around us. And one of those bridges is translational research. This kind of research, taking discoveries from bench to bedside, from classroom to community. That's part of the DNA at IUPUI. And it really changes people's lives. I think the pandemic offered a really powerful recent example about the power of translational research. Teams across this campus worked to develop diagnostic tools. We developed the state's coronavirus data hub. We launched the first statewide prevalence study in the entire country. And we expanded contact tracing for the city of Indianapolis. And that's just, you know, one really powerful example, but it's just a fraction of what I could highlight. The IUPUI Center for Translating Research into Practice helps create an environment where this type of research can thrive. Events like today's Trip Showcase shines a spotlight on some of the impressive work being done across campus that connects with and makes a difference really all over the world. Now, as many of you in the room know, the Center for Translating Research into Practice was started by Chancellor Bantz and by Dr. Petronio. Dr. Petronio brings tremendous expertise in translating research into practice, which is at the core of her really outstanding scholarship on different forms of communication. I got to read some of that when I was working in Chancellor Bantz's office. And Dr. Petronio's partner in this initiative, as well as her partner in many other aspects of life, is Charles Bantz, who served as IUPUI's 4th chancellor and who made a transformational difference in the life of this campus. I mean, I could go on and on about that, but Chancellor Bantz helped advance IUPUI's commitment to the community. He helped increase enrollment on campus. He helped grow research funding. He helped us earn a place on the President's Higher Education Community Service Honor Roll, and I could go on and on. So we're really grateful, Charles, for everything you've done for the campus. We're grateful for everything you continue to do for the campus. I am personally grateful for all that you do for me. And having said that, I hope you'll all join me in welcoming to the podium Chancellor Bantz.
Thank you. I'm going to twist the podium a little. No, I'm not. No, because I noticed how off angle Andy looked, and I know him better than that. So thank you for the kind words, Andy. Thank you most of all for the work you have done in so many roles, contributing to the success of the campus in our community. Most people don't know the number of ways. I won't talk about school board service or anything else, but the levels of service that you've had. I'm here to give you just a brief sense about the history of the center. I'm here to introduce a woman who I think needs no introduction, Sandra Petronio, but I will do it anyway and ask her to chime in if she chooses to as part of this. The history of the center is really simple. I married up many years ago to a really smart professor I met at the University of Minnesota, who became obsessed with a number of things, most of all privacy management, but also the notion of translating research into practice in her own area and in communication and in social science, and wrote about that back in the 90s. In 2003, we came here after having been at Wayne State in Detroit for a few years as I was provost and Sandra was a professor in medicine and in communication. And we came here, and one day, probably after reception, we're in the car driving up to the north, not north side, up into Meridian Kessler. And Sandra says, you know, this is the most translational campus we've ever been at. And Andy just gave some good evidence of that. There is a history here that, you know, sort of I excavated some of before I came, because you always want to look at what your predecessor did, especially if they did it for 16 or 17 years. This would be a good lesson about the kind of work you do. Well, it turned out I was the first PhD to be chancellor. Our first one was a dentist, a very, very capable person named Maynard Hine, and then Glenn Irwin, who's dean of the School of Medicine, and Jerry Bepko was the legendary dean of the what's now McKinney School, and it probably wouldn't be the McKinney School if it wasn't for Jerry, who was a very close friend of Bob McKinney. You might notice they're all professional schools. And I did. I'd never been at a campus that had quite such an impact to have such a focus group of leaders who'd all been professionals and active in their profession and actively translating scholarly work into what they did. But I came here and Sandra says, this is the most, and I'm like, yeah, I agree. And what is really striking that we'd already talked about was we did not highlight the work of our faculty to the level I expected for how good they are. I was really sort of startled. We'd figured out our students were terrific, and students had actually been placed in the center. Amy and some of her colleagues in that area in external affairs were doing it, but faculty, we didn't think were. And we wanted to find a way to celebrate people who are doing really good, hard work that affects the community, that translates into practice. And that was Sandra's idea. Celebrate the faculty. And so she started talking to people, and she met Steve Viewig, and they talked to people, and they came up with a roadmap. And a whole series of those roadmaps, we've hit those mile markers. The showcase was one of those. This goes back a decade, more than a decade. Having a keynote speaker in the spring who has demonstrated that you can do the very best translational work with a great impact and still be a highly successful scholar. We bring them in and ask them to talk and demonstrate that, because sometimes on a campus you say, can you really be successful? Can you really do it? And frankly, if you've gotten your PhD and did your postdoc in a place where people didn't do translational work, you might really, that's a legitimate question to ask. And so both of those events were ideas that they developed. We, Sandra and I, decided that we wanted to give an award to somebody who's on our faculty who's done that kind of work, and that's where the Bantz-Petronio award came from. And the campus has been very generous in helping to support it. So the gift we made is still there. And that has been very helpful. And we've recognized terrific people. We're looking forward to the presentation today of that. And so we developed those things. And there was this idea to try and get faculty to connect across the campus and share their research. And we tried some different things besides those two events. And years later, the pandemic happened. And so now we have a Scholar of the Month because we had Zoom to do it. And we are averaging, I would say, I'm looking back at Nuri, our wizard back there, and we're averaging what, 40 maybe people easy every single month coming together occasionally from outside the United States, watching, asking questions. Exactly one of the things we were hoping to see happen over these years. And near the end of that time period, I stepped down, and thanks to some really wonderful people, it was created the Bantz Community Fellowship, and thanks to Simon Atkinson being frustrated in a committee meeting, saying, there's this young person who has this great idea. We had the community scholar as well for some of these years. And that's also a piece of it, because what underlay all of this work is that commitment that you just heard Andy refer to community. Glenn Irwin, Maynard Hein, Jerry Bepko were as anchored in a community as you ever could be. I mean, it was astounding to me to look at Jerry's CV when I was looking at this job and the number of boards he was on, the way he connected in different ways over the years. And that kind of connection of scholarship, practice, and community is what's really unique. So there's a lot to celebrate, but as always, my wise partner, when we were talking about this the other day, says, do you want to say it or do you want me to say it for you?
I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
We're not done.
There's so many wise things.
Yeah, there are so many wise things. I thought that too. He said, we're not done. We're coming out of a pandemic. We're in a very difficult time in this country. There's a lot of uncertainty. And we've got lots to do. And she talked to me about some of those things. I don't need to tell some of you, because I think today's people who are being recognized for their awards have worked on some of those things. I mean, prisoner reentry, come on, take something easy. Trying to go down in genomic research to find something. I was trying to remember if it was 5 zeros in front of that last digit or 6, the probability. I mean, that's just scary, difficult problems to go after. Oh, and gender change transition with families in this country at this moment. You are doing hard things. And I can't look back at Fran Quigley and not think about Ampath, one of our greatest examples of people who took their profession and all their training and their students to see how it can get done in a very hard circumstance, which is the way Joe explained to me that program started. That and the Russians invaded Afghanistan. You'll have to ask Fran about that. So I'm supposed to introduce or welcome Sandra here. I'm happy always to do that.
I think you've made it perfectly good.
Wow, I've just got my closing line. She just said, if you didn't hear, I made it perfectly good. Go with that one. And say, I'd like to introduce Amy Conrad Warner. It's spectacular. What's your title tonight? Community engagement. I hired her into external affairs, which always made me a little uncomfortable.
Thanks, Charles.
It's good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you can all see that just by the stories that Charles shared, this is something that is so unique about IUPUI, that the more people we bring to this institution as students, as researchers, as faculty members, as administrators, the more people who come and say, you know what? This is happening. This is pervasive throughout our campus. It's just something to truly celebrate. So in honor of Charles, we were able to establish this fellowship. And I think it's important really to know that this community fellowship and also a community scholar award really ensures that this legacy that has been part of the founding of IUPUI and the continuous growth of IUPUI continues on. Many of us who are here today also were part of the initial funding as donors to the initial fund that established this opportunity that can award the awards you're going to hear about today. It's a unique funding opportunity for our community engaged scholars to come forward and invest a year in their research areas and bring teams of partners together who can make that very pervasive and make sense throughout the community. So today we are really fortunate that we have a 2022 Charles Bantz Community Fellowship being awarded to a person in the IU Robert H. McKinney School of Law with a project entitled The Community Engagement at Its Best, a holistic approach to prison reentry. And it is a collaboration between Professor Lonnie Silva and Thomas Ridley's One Like Me, the Martin Luther King Jr. Center, and I see our prosecutor back there, the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. So the goal of this project, if you have not read about it, is to utilize this collaborative effort in this reentry clinic to reduce recidivism and also enhance public safety really at the grassroots level. This is incredibly developed, and there's a wonderful nuance and a dance between the community partners and the researchers by helping released people from prison successfully navigate all of the reentry related issues. So it's a common issue in communities throughout the United States. It's pervasive in the city of Indianapolis, and we have community members and researchers that want to work together to see that these issues are addressed and tackled. So Charles' vision for this type of a fellowship was perfectly suited for Professor Silva's award. So we have a little video that we'd like to share with you, and I will let the video run.
So the overall issue that we try to address is poverty, and that's a really big issue, right? And it takes all of us to do that. But when we talk about poverty, we're talking about equality of opportunity. So folks getting out of prison, they are already at a deficit in terms of skill, employment, history, and kind of under education. And so what we try to do is focus on those things that we know are going to make a difference in people's lives. You don't really think that a driver's license is going to make such a difference in someone's life, but it actually does. The opportunities to acquire a job that pays a living wage in the city as a, low-skilled laborer are very low. But once you get outside of Indianapolis and the donut, there are higher wage earning jobs, and you need a license to get there. Indianapolis, unfortunately, doesn't have a very robust public transportation system, which I know they're working on. So right now, the driver's license is all that folks have. And when they're saddled with thousands of dollars in old traffic tickets and reinstatement fees. It seems like they're never going to get out from underneath that. And then we enter into kind of an arena of hopelessness and despair. And so that driver's license allows people to be mobile and to move outside of Marion County to kind of get those jobs that are paying $20, $22 an hour for low-skilled laboring jobs. Same with housing, right? We also help people with expungement. We here at the law school, we screen for expungement, but we have very strong networks with organizations like Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic that provide expungement assistance. And so removing somebody's criminal history from public purview also allows them to not only secure better employment, but also secure safe and affordable housing, an opportunity they may not have had if they did not get an expungement.
This project's making my community a better place by really improving the talents and skills that social workers will bring to the table when they go work in the community after graduation. But also it's benefiting the community where I live and work by really giving people access to opportunities that they might not be able to get on their own or they didn't know about. I think it's really important to bring services to the people and not make them come to you. So by really bringing law students and social work students to the neighborhood to provide these services with our partners is really valuable.
This project, as I said, has the ability to change this community. And when you get this kind of change in your community, it elevates self-worth. And when you have self-worth elevated, the sky's the limit. These people now will no longer tear up their own neighborhoods and things of this nature. Somebody has said that we matter. It's hard to have self-worth when nothing seems to come for you. It goes everywhere else for everybody. But now when they see us coming there in the droves that we come in there, the multiple cars, the actual prosecutors, you name it, comes in here. These brilliant law school students who could be a million other places come in here. And they look at you and speak to you as the human that you are. That makes an incredible difference.
The impetus behind this whole fellowship effort was that we're all learning from each other to get the best solution. So we wanted to award today. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Lonnie, it's broken. No, just kidding. I would like to award to you the Charles Bantz Chancellor Community Fellowship to Lonnie Silva 2022. And this beautiful piece was created by the Heron School of Art. And it will permanently be displayed wherever she would like, and she can even rotate it between her partners.
Hi, so I'm incredibly nervous, which is crazy because I teach a class of 80 to 100 people, but I am in the presence of greatness here. So I am going to spend my very brief time thanking people. I have a bunch of people to thank. So first and foremost, I'd like to thank you, Chancellor Bantz, and you, Dr. Petronio. I'm very humbled and honored, and I promise you both that your generosity will result in an enormous impact on the Indianapolis community, particularly poor communities of color living in low-income, high-crime neighborhoods. So I just wanted to thank you for that. I have some mentors here that I'd also like to thank. Interim Chancellor Klein, thank you so much for your support and encouragement. You're always there when I need to talk to somebody about where to go next. You're always trying to encourage me to be an administrator, which I refuse to do. But I'd also like to thank Vice Dean Adams. I think you are an understated gem in the law school, and you have been such a role model to me and have inspired me in so many different ways. You encouraged me to stay true to my passion, and you made a way for me to do it with the clinic. And so I owe you so much. And so thank you very much. And you, Fran Quigley, thank you for encouraging me to apply for the award. I mean, without your encouragement that day at the clinic meeting, I probably wouldn't have applied. So thank you very much. I have my community partners here. We have Ryan Mears here, Emily Schrock, and Jennifer Joy. The prosecutor's office has been an invaluable asset to the program. They are always there. They come to every single outreach. Emily Schrock has really made sure that the reentry clinic gets what it needs from the prosecutor's office to make sure that we can remove some of those barriers. And I can't thank you enough, Emily, for all of the support. I'd also like to thank Allison Luthi, who was featured, and she's also here today. She's not only the executive director of the MLK Center, she's also an adjunct faculty member here. And she is dealing really with teaching me about social work, and that's our collaborative department here. She's taken on the lion's share of the field placement supervision, and I have learned so much from her just generally about resources that I didn't know. And then Jennifer Poltruck from Thomas Ridley's One Like Me. She's the program director over there, and she is fabulous. I mean, I cannot tell you what levels that she's really taken that organization to. It's very small grassroots, and we couldn't do the reentry work without that organization. They are the credible messenger for us. And so I wanted to thank my community partners, not only for your dedication to the community and to justice, but also for your friendship over the past couple of years. I mean, we worked through a lot of hard issues, and we deal with a rough crowd sometimes, and we've been able to survive and thrive in neighborhoods that many of the people in the ivory tower probably couldn't. And then finally, none of my law students are here, none of the social work students are here, but thank you to the students. I mean, they are the workhorses, they are the laborers, they are the people that come in with that idealistic kind of, thought process that really kind of keeps us on our toes. And so I'll be available after this, so please come talk to me about expanding resources and trying to figure out a way to kind of keep this momentum going in the neighborhood. So thank you very much.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Silva. And you can see what a great example this is of all the things that we've been hearing about around what happens here at our campus and the commitment to engaging with the community, involving students, and making things better. So thank you very much. And I will say, with all your community partners here, I hope you'll take advantage of our photographer who's taking my picture right now afterwards and get some pictures with you and this lovely art piece from the Heron School of Art. So my job now is I get to introduce to you the Bantz Community Scholar Award. And I'm grateful to do that because I am a social worker. I get to play over there in the School of Social Work too. And this award is being presented to a dear colleague of ours, Richard Brandon Friedman, who is the assistant professor in the School of Social Work. And his project is Families in Transition, Development of a Therapeutic Group for Gender Diverse Youth and Their Caregivers. And it's a collaboration, as all of these are, with Gender Nexus, Gender Expansive Kids and Company, and PFLAG of Fishers. And this research project evaluates a therapeutic support group designed to meet the needs of gender diverse youth and their caregivers. And the group plans to enhance the social and emotional well-being of participants through psychoeducation, skill development, familiar relationship and communication building, and community connectedness. But the people that are involved with it can say it better. So let me play this amazing video. Thank you, McLucas Productions, for putting these together.
One of the core concerns when you're working with gender diverse youth is that they're experiencing a lot of isolation, discrimination, and bias, and they need to be able to communicate their needs. At the same time, caregivers need to be able to learn what the youth need and be able to communicate with the youth. Both of those are critical in order for the youth to receive the care that they need, the gender affirming care they need. And so one thing that this group is designed to do is to work with the youth to be able to communicate their needs and build their assertiveness so that they can address some of those concerns. At the same time, it's helping caregivers learn about gender and how to discuss that gender with the youth. And the third component of this group will be to facilitate communication between the caregivers and the youth so that they can discuss their needs and help meet the needs of the youth. This will help improve the youth's functioning as well as the supports for the caregivers as they are able to meet with other caregivers and have a community of their own. Incorporating gender nexus, gecko, and P-flag fishers further advances our goals, as those community agencies and those members of the community have the expertise and personal experiences that are necessary to meet the community needs. While this group is being developed locally, we intend in the future to build upon the findings of this research and expand access to the curriculum to service providers in other areas who may not have access to some of the services and the community agencies that we have here.
This project is solving a problem in the community of helping gender diverse youth and their families learn more about each other and learn more about each other's needs. Because we're finding that as children and young adults and youth are coming out as gender diverse, it creates a very seismic shift in families sometimes. And so being able to walk alongside families as we're processing that shift with them and the change in dynamics will not only help solve a problem, but it will also help the community rethink how identity is lived and experienced.
I got involved in this project because Richard and I are both passionate about supporting families of gender diverse youth. I was excited to help them in this one. When our child told us they were trans 10 years ago, there were very few resources for parents. We finally got lots of information, connection, and resources from a therapy group for parents of trans kids. Up to that point, we felt very isolated and adrift. We really appreciate the guidance from social workers and the camaraderie with the other parents. This project combines those benefits with the added bonus of simultaneous youth programming as well.
The Bantz grant allows us to work with the inevitable struggles that our kids face, in that every child needs to know that there are other kids who share and reflect their experiences. And just creating the space where kids can have that experience with others, it just doesn't magically happen. It requires careful thought, consideration, examination. It requires evaluation after the fact so that we can make this experience as full and rich as possible. And in that way, not only are we helping the kids, but we're also helping the parents. And the more that we can support both kids and parents as a whole unit, the better we make our community.
So congratulations, Dr. Brainerd. Come forward, please. This is your chance. Give him a big applause. If you'd like to present me this award that was made, I put it back together. And it was also designed by the Heron School of Art. So congratulations, and please say a few words.
All right, thank you. As I look at this program, as I said, I'm a social worker, and I came to this both with my experience and my clients' experiences. So I identify as a cisgender white male, use he, him pronouns, and I recognize that I'm working with gender diverse youth and with parents of gender diverse youth. And so that's where the community partners really come into this project. And so I have Christina Inskeep, who founded Gecko, which, as she said in the video, is a parent of a trans youth. And so that gives the experience that I don't have. I may have clinical experience, but I don't have real life experience. And then we have Emma Vosicki from Gender Nexus, who brings some of the experience with the agency as well as her own lived experience. And so when I look at a project like this, it just can't be done without those experiences. And so that was the core piece for me, is building on their knowledge and what I can do as a researcher. I also want to recognize Tayan Swafford, who's my graduate research assistant, and also the one who came up with the name of the project, Families in Transition. So that was him. I would also like to recognize Dean Davis of the School of Social Work, who has supported a lot of social work faculty through this process, provides us with a lot of support. And then, of course, the youth. We developed a youth program a couple of years ago that was just a youth component. And then looking at the needs of the families, we realized that the caregivers needed something. And then we also had to really facilitate that interaction. So we'll be using the experiences of some of the youth We'll be doing a lot of interviews with the youth and with caregivers to develop this curriculum and then build it so that we can really meet their needs.
Congratulations. Yes, big round of applause. The next award is the Bantz-Petronio Trip Award. You already heard a little bit about it. We're going to ask Chancellor Bantz to present this award. So come on back up.
Yeah, and we're so focused on the first part, I forgot this. Welcome to in post-chancellor life, I can do that. I can say it just like I did as a teacher. Oops. I forgot that part of the formula. We've all done, no, not all of us have done that, but I have. Sandra and I, as I mentioned, established this in 2013. Yeah, okay. So we're going on 10 years of doing this, and we really, as I mentioned, wanted to recognize members of the faculty for doing this work. And there's been a committee of which Steve is involved with, and previous award winners, once there were previous award winners, have been selecting it. Sandra and I are not involved in selecting it, which is the deal when it's a donor done deal. And we are thrilled today to have, and it's Skaar, right? No? Skaar. Skaar. Yeah. Okay. See, I would have pronounced it that way. Just respond to a lot worse things. So we should see what they've done with my name and her name. So we probably could have that conversation. We've got a video as well Nuri has put together, and I mentioned it, the research briefly, but go ahead.
The estimates are currently that in the United States there are approximately 100,000 people every year that die from adverse drug reactions. There's also estimates that many drugs work in less than half of the people that actually take them. And with that many people that are actually dying from these adverse drug reactions, and the amount of people that are not getting the full and beneficial effects of the drugs, makes this a huge, really a big burden to our healthcare system, as well as to the individuals who either have a bad reaction to a drug or are taking drugs that are ineffective during that time when they're actually taking them. My research is really focused on trying to understand how to improve the way we use drug therapies that are currently being used. There's a lot of variability between the way people respond to drugs. Part of that is because of the genetics, so the genes we inherit from our parents. With some drugs, we can actually use those genetic markers as a way to predict which is going to be the best drug for a particular individual. So combining the genetics and the pharmacology, what we call pharmacogenetics or pharmacogenomics, is the combination that we can use to really help healthcare providers choose the best drug for the individual, so we can minimize the toxicities and side effects, but maximize the effectiveness.
So there are a lot of benefits that this research is bringing. Adverse drug events are a big problem in the health system. And we have a lot of pharmacogenomic information that we've culled and learned over the course of decades, which we've yet to translate into clinical care. And Dr. Skaar, as head of the Pharmacogenomics Project within the Indiana University Precision Health Initiative and the Indiana Institute for Personalized Medicine, has really been transformational in bringing that data to the clinical practice. Before this project, through the Precision Health Initiative, we didn't have the ability to order pharmacogenomic testing directly in the electronic health record. And we certainly didn't have the ability to have clinical decision support implemented in the health record, so that when we go to prescribe a drug, that we know that we're giving the right dose at the right time to the right patient.
There's so many ways that this research has made a difference in our community. We've been able to implement some pharmacogenomics testing statewide, which has been very new to the Indiana and our Hoosiers, and it's really nice to be able to take those things out to the community. So it's not just those patients that are here being treated at the academic health center, but all those patients living in more rural, underserved areas are also getting the benefits of this research.
I got involved in this project to be a voice for the unseen and the unheard, and to hopefully increase awareness about some of the barriers racial and ethnic minorities face when participating in research and clinical trials. Who should care about this research? Everyone should care. We should care that equal access to health care and effective treatments exist for all populations. We are all interconnected, and what adversely affects one population will certainly have some effect on the population as a whole.
So congratulations, we have a fabulous award for you too that we'd like to present. And one of the honors that the Bantz-Petronio awardee gets is to share a little bit of their work, so we get to hear from Dr. Skaar to present some of this work now. And you'll get to talk to everybody afterwards, so don't worry if you have questions, etc. Sorry, home audience, you'll have to send them in. But people here will have a chance to talk with folks later, but welcome, I'd love to hear from you. And here's, you can drive.
Thank you. So thank you, and Chancellor Bantz and Dr. Petronio and Dr. Klein, who I think had to leave to catch a flight. Thank you for really appreciating and understanding the challenges that are go into doing translational research. I think there's oftentimes people don't really understand that, and it's really a privilege to be honored on behalf of a variety of my colleagues that are sitting in the row over there that really did the work that I'm going to talk about. And I wasn't nervous at the beginning, but now they're here, so now I'm going to make sure I got the right number of zeros between each of those numbers you were talking about. And as a geneticist, it was nice to hear Dr. Klein refer to the DNA in IUPUI as part of it. So that was nice. But seriously, this is a privilege and an honor, and thank you to all the people that nominated me and have done all the work that I get to talk about. And if I can, oops, that was the wrong way. So the problem we're addressing, as you saw in the video, is that there's a lot of variability in the way people respond to drugs. All right, and you may all have some experience of this, like, yeah, this drug works for me, this one works for somebody else. And the problem is some of those are bad reactions. And these are some estimates that there's up to maybe many as 100,000 people that die every year in the US from adverse drug reactions. And on a personal note, my former neighbor was one of them who had a potentially curable cancer, died from the chemotherapy. And these are just many of these things that happen. And there's over 2 million hospitalizations that happen every year from a variety of these drugs. So what I'm going to do is give you, I'll start with 3 examples of things where we identified some of these really bad reactions and we were able to figure out the reason behind it for that particular individual person. As you may gather, we're looking at the genetic component of these reactions. And so the first one is a colon cancer patient that was seen here in our cancer center, was treated with a standard dose of Xeloda or capecitabine, got really bad toxicities, ended up hospitalized for 3 weeks. After that, normally you don't get hospitalized at all. And there's this DPYD gene is a gene that eliminates that drug from your body, and most people have that. We thought, well, maybe that was it, so we did some genetic testing there. We didn't see it, but for the common genetic variability that we see there, but fortunately we had sequenced their entire genome, so we could look at their whole genome to see if we could figure out what else was there. Now, for the non-geneticists in the crowd, so the genome contains, from each parent, we get 3.2 billion base pairs so that's 6.5 billion that we have in the cells. And our job was to try and figure out which of those ones was the wrong one. All right. And to put it in perspective, if you took your smartphones, we had 4 different color smartphones, stacked them from here to the moon, that's about 2.5 billion. All right. So we had to figure out of there which one was the one that was the wrong one. Well, If you look for any of the genetic gurus, you can see this is a report. And if you see where the arrow is in the middle of the screen, there's supposed to be just a green peak there, and there's actually a green and a black one there. That's about 180,000 miles of these iPhones stacked towards the moon. There was one of them that was the wrong color that we figured out that didn't look right. And so we using some informatics stuff, we predicted that, and it said, I don't think this enzyme is going to work if it's got that particular genetic variant. So we then went back, and this is was the place where this is literally 1 in 100,000 to 1 in a million people have this particular change in their DNA. And so we then, but we didn't really know the function. So in collaboration with some collaborators at Mayo Clinic, we put this genetic variant into an assay in a petri dish and said, does this have its normal activity? And compared to the wild type one, which you see has 100% of the normal activity, it had only 14% of the activity compared to the other ones, which means that that patient, the reason they got really sick was because their drug levels of a toxic chemotherapy drug ended up to be much higher than you normally would expect. And that's what caused that patient to get the toxicity. So this is now one we can watch out for. And if we see this, we can say, okay, don't give that patient that much of that particular drug. Another example is this was a different chemotherapy, docetaxel, one that's commonly used for colon cancer, breast cancer, a variety of different cancers. And this patient got a single dose of this and was hospitalized for 12 days. Several of those were in the intensive care unit because of toxicities due to that. And we started looking, knowing the pharmacology about this drug. We said, well, maybe there's some genetic variants, some rare genetic variants in the enzyme that metabolizes this drug and gets rid of it. And sure enough, we found that what we call, these are some of the nerdy names we named for these things. The 3A4 star 22 was a variant, and then they had a different one called the star 3, which are different indications of changes in their genetics. And we knew that those don't do a very good job of metabolizing that drug. It's just that we haven't been testing for these things yet because they're rare. And there haven't been quite enough evidence yet to really say that we should be using these clinically. So we then went also and looked in our database to see whether there's anybody else that we could find that had those same genetic variants that were given that drug. And we found two of them in our database, the one that I just talked about, another one that had also really bad toxicity, grade 3 leukopenia, and some really bad stuff, was really sick. The third one we found in the literature, and that patient actually died from the docetaxel therapy. Right, so it's these sort of things that we're doing, looking in some cases at these really rare cases to find these. And this was also consistent with some of the FDA labeling. So the third example is a patient that Dr. Eden, who's here with us today, saw in his clinic that was part of a clinical trial. And it was a patient who had chronic back pain for quite some time and was taking Norco or hydrocodone and taking a couple different opioids, and it just wasn't working very well. And eventually, because she was on opioids, got a urine drug screen, and it turned out positive for cocaine and marijuana. She then admitted that those drugs weren't working, so she resorted to street drugs to cure the pain. But she then, all the opioids were cut off. She went on high dose NSAIDs, so high dose ibuprofen, which then, because it turned out she had another genetic variant, ended up with chronic kidney disease. And you can see that line that's going up over time from 2013 to 2019 is the indication that her kidneys are going bad because she had that. Well, it turns out, after we did some genetic testing, that she is what we call a CYP2D6 poor metabolizer. So she can't actually activate those opioids. And that's why she wasn't getting any effect from it, because the opioids need to be actually activated. And this is an example, and I think this is the only chemical structure I'll show you here. But if you take, for example, codeine, which is in Tylenol 3 and is commonly used, it by itself is a prodrug, and it doesn't have any real analgesic activity until our liver metabolizes it. Makes one little change in red there that you can see. It takes the methyl group off and puts the hydroxy group on and converts that into morphine. right? Morphine, we all know, is a very active analgesic drug. The problem is there is 5 to 10% of the population, depending on the ancestry, that has genetic variants, so they don't have any functional enzyme, that CYP2D6 enzyme, all right? And consequently, as shown in the bottom graph here, they make no morphine out of that drug, so they don't get any effect. And if you look, so the bottom part of this is after a single dose of codeine in patients that in the blue or red had either normal or sometimes actually more than normal 2D6 activity, but the green one are those people that are genetic, what we call poor metabolizers, so they can't metabolize it. And you can see that's a flat line and they make no morphine out of that drug, and it doesn't work for them. Right. And so this is also the case with some other drugs. In this case, so hydrocodone I mentioned is another one that gets metabolized to hydromorphone, which you may recognize as a very potent opioid, and to a certain extent oxycodone. So the bottom line in this patient was because she was a poor metabolizer, wasn't getting the benefit from the prescribed opioids, ended up going on with street drugs, getting cocaine, which did work because that doesn't need to be activated, and then ended up on these high dose NSAIDs and now has chronic kidney disease, and so is in rough shape. So our knowing this, so some of these we're saying, okay, we really need to start translating this and using this in the clinic. And so together with a national consortium, we've been writing clinical guidelines that say if a patient comes, if you know the genetic status in some of these examples, what should you do as a clinician? And this is an example of one that we've published. We call them CPIC guidelines, which stands for Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium Guidelines. And they're really designed to help clinicians figure out how to use this genetic information, because in med school, you get very little genetics training, right? And this is one of these things that unless you're somebody like me who thinks about this day and night and, on the way to work, on the way home and all this stuff, you may not remember all this stuff. And so these guidelines have now started to become accepted and used in like insurance companies and stuff. And this is an example from one of the CMS, which is the Medicare, the guides for Medicare. As you can see, you don't have to read the whole thing, but the first part is the pharmacogenetics tests are indicated when medications are being considered for use, when it's been demonstrated to be clinically actionable as defined by the FDA and these CPIC guidelines. So they're now accepting these for saying, okay, yes, this is now medically necessary, and you can go ahead and start doing these. So we've done a variety of them. I think now I've been involved in 3 of them, but there's about I can't remember, 26 now, I think, or something like that, where they're starting to be recognized like this. So these are examples of what we call pharmacogenetics, right? So it's how do your genetics impact the way you respond to drugs? And so that's what that's really what we're doing, is both the discovery, as I mentioned in the beginning, and then I'll take you through some of the more translational stuff that we're actually doing. And there's lots of opportunities for this and we've published in the last couple of years some publications on it. Here's one just showing where we describe the opportunities across 11 healthcare systems, population-wide. The next one is one looking at patients with advanced solid cancer patients, how often we can, there's opportunities there, opportunities in cystic fibrosis, as well as sickle cell anemia. So there's a wide variety of different diseases where these genetic testing can be helpful. So how do you start just going, right? What all do you need? You just need a genetic test? Well, no, you need, because this is not something that's well enough known, and a lot of people don't know, and you don't have the facilities to do it. So as part of the, the Precision Health Initiative of the Indiana University Grand Challenge a couple of years ago, we're funded to really get this going and start using it more clinically. And so what all did we have to do? Well, on here is a cartoon that really shows what you have to have set up in order to get the population on the left separated to those on the right, where you can say this patient needs this drug, this one needs this drug, and so on and so on. So you need the genetic testing lab, you need to figure out how to get it reimbursed, so you need some reinsurance. You need to educate the physicians and the nurses and everybody so they know how to use it. You need to get it into their medical record system. And that's all fine as long as the patient's coming back to the same medical system, but you want to give the information directly to them too. So the next few slides, I'll tell you how we've been doing some of this. And this, the first slide is our pharmacogenetics lab, which is here in the Department of Medical Molecular Genetics. It's a clinical genetic testing lab. You can see over the years the number of patients per month that have been tested for these genetic variants that have clinical implications for the drugs they're taking. And you see it started out, down under 50 for a while, but now we're hanging up there over 300 or around 250 to 300 patients a month are being tested for these genetic variants to guide their therapy clinically. And so here's a list, and I can go through every one of them, but leave it for a second. You can look at it and see drugs that you might be familiar with. I've listed only the generic names here, just because for many of them, there's a whole bunch of different names. But I'll give you an example of one case where this has now become pure clinical practice. And this is a gene, it's called CYP2C19, which is another one of the liver enzymes that activates drugs. And Plavix or clopidogrel is one of those drugs that needs to be activated by that particular enzyme. And there's about 15% or so, somewhere between 10 and 20% of the population that doesn't have any or has reduced 2C19 activity because of genetic variants. They do not activate Plavix or clopidogrel very well, and consequently, they don't get much benefit. And this is some work that we did looking at the clinical outcomes of patients after they had a stent placed in their heart and they were placed on either Plavix or an alternative drug, which does not need to be activated by that. And you can see the cumulative incidence on the y-axis over time. You can see the red line is those patients that were had impaired genetic impairments in their 2C19 gene, so they could not activate Plavix or clopidogrel as well. And you can see they had more cases of heart attacks and strokes and things like that. So this was a one that we had put together with a variety of other institutions, a collective collaboration, and based on this as well as a bunch of other evidence, it is now in all the IU Health cath labs where they put stents in. If the patient is being considered for clopidogrel, they will do the genetic test just automatically. It's on their order set and it gets run, and then they will use that to determine whether they should get Plavix or one of those alternative drugs, which in some cases still on patent, a lot more expensive, and in some cases has a higher risk of bleeding associated with it. So there's some drawbacks to just putting everybody on those. So in order to do that, and we had to make sure that the clinicians knew how to actually do that, to know if they had genetic variants in their medical records. So we now have in Cerner from IU Health and some in Eskenazi and in Epic an alert. So if a physician or somebody prescribes clopidogrel to a patient who has these genetic variants known, it'll send up a warning that looks similar to this that says, hold on, we got an issue here. And it'll warn them so they can say, okay, maybe we need to give an alternative drug. That all works fine as long as the patient comes back to IU healthcare system, right? Now, if you saw the snow the other day, and if people are starting to think it's time to head south, and you're down in Arizona or Florida and you have an issue, this isn't going to work because you're going to be in a different healthcare system. So what we've started doing, and we're still trying to understand how to actually return this stuff safely and effectively to patients. But what we're doing is we've got a letter that's got a little punch out card on it, which they can stick in their wallet. So if they ever go to the doctor, they can they can show that. And this is zoomed in level of it. It's got their name and a couple things to identify them so they know they got the right person. And then it says what their genetic status is. And on the back of it, it says, these are the drugs that you should be watching out for if you're going to prescribe this drug. So they can pull it out, and then it's got a number on there. They can call us if they don't know what to do about it. So to really also help everybody understand more about this, we've got some additional funding from NIH to develop a training education system. We call it Test to Learn, so we can educate the providers to really know how to use this stuff. And So you can see on here is for physician assistants, pharmacists, MDs, nurse practitioners, counselors, nurses, and it's a training module that will provide continuing education credit for each of these disciplines. And an interesting thing is you can get your own testing done and use your own test results in the training module as you're learning about it. So it has a little more of a real feel to it rather than just, hypothetically, if somebody had this, you can say, okay, if you've got this, you can do it. So it's a way we're really working to train all the providers so they can actually use this information. Then, so we don't know everything yet, right? We've got a lot we need to yet continue to validate and figure out, because just, one study isn't enough to actually start clinically implementing this. So we're doing a variety of other clinical studies. This is the results from a trial that we ran. We're in one of the secondary analyses. We showed that if you use genotype guided therapy versus just standard therapy you normally use for, in this case, mental health drugs, so antidepressants, we actually reduced the adverse event rate from 18 out of about 300 down to 7 because they had the genetic information to actually help that. In a similar thing, looking at the opioids, patients who had their impaired 2D6 had a much higher rate of reporting uncontrolled pain in their medical records that we could actually track down. So it looks like, having this information we think is going to be helpful for the different patients. This is a study that was done. Ebony, one of the people that was in the video, did. It's African-American patients have a quite a bit higher rate of peripheral neuropathy in response to paclitaxel, one of the chemotherapy drugs. And so she was one of my grad students, and we're trying to figure out why might that be. Well, it turns out part of it is probably because of this gene CYP2C8, which is what metabolizes and eliminates paclitaxel. And African Americans have a much higher frequency of genetic variants in that enzyme that cause reduced activity. So their chemotherapy drugs build up to a higher level. And if you look, the main point here is in the bottom row. Those are patients who have a dramatically reduced 2C8 function, and this is in all just African Americans. All 7 of the 7 reported grade 2 through 4 neuropathy, and all 7 of those 7 had to have a dose reduction in their paclitaxel because of the toxicities, indicating that that's probably part of the reason why the African Americans have a much more difficult time tolerating that. And hopefully we can in the future start using that. And then in another study that Dr. Eden led, who's sitting over here, in patients that were in hypertensive patients, there's about almost 400 of them, a genetic variant that predicted a reduced response to these antihypertensive drugs was associated with an 88% increased odds of having uncontrolled hypertension. And then in the 1-year follow-up period, those patients that were genotyped had they improved their blood pressure by 4 millimeters of mercury, which is a clinically significant actual increase. And this was then the foundation of a big now NIH funded grant multi-center that's together with us and Vanderbilt and Mount Sinai, University of Florida and Duke that are enrolling patients. In this case, going to be 4,000 patients. I think we've enrolled over 900 African Americans in this study here in Indianapolis from Eskenazi and IU Health. And that slide was outdated. I think I had 500 on there, but I think it's over 900 now that we have, as well as 3 other trials, which some of these other things that we've done have led to where we're randomizing patients to either get just your normal standard of care you get, or we're going to do a genetic test for the specific drugs that we think we can help guide you therapy better, and then see at the end of it, do you have better outcomes? One is similar to what I just talked about called GUARD. It's African Americans with hypertension. We have another one that is open to patients who are having acute pain. So these are mostly patients who are getting hip and knee replacements. So if we do the genotyping first, can we do a better job of prescribing the opioids, controlling your pain? A third one is patients with chronic pain, a very similar thing. So it's doing those that have chronic pain. And then a fourth is patients with depression, use it to do a better job of prescribing their pain medications. So these are things we're really trying to push the evidence across the finish line into the end zone so we can say, okay, now we can start using this clinically to guide these therapies. And so, ongoing, we're going to really continue to implement these genetic tests that we know can work in clinical practice, validate additional tests that there's preliminary evidence for clinical value, and hopefully discover genetic tests that can predict drug response. So in a variety of aspects of that. And really, so ultimately, the goal here is to get the right drug to the right patient at the right dose at the right time, so we can reduce the use of drugs that are ineffective for a particular individual, reduce drug side effects for many of them, and improve how well these existing drugs work. And really, on behalf of this is part of the team. We can't hardly fit all of them on there. As you can imagine, this has been a huge effort, and it's I almost feel guilty standing up here talking about this when so many other people did all the work actually for this. But so really, on behalf of the team, many of who are sitting here and many around the world, thank you again. It's an honor for this. Thank you.
Yeah.
So he'll have an open chair over there for everybody to talk about the medications that they're on. If he has any. So free consultation.
Happy to chat. I will warn you, Mike, oldest son said, one thing you never want to do is pass time. What he does is take as much time as you want. So I'm happy to chat.
Well, thank you. This was wonderful. And colleagues that are here with Todd, can you stand, please, so we can recognize you? Thank you. Thank you all for the great work that you're doing. That was wonderful. Really appreciate it. Really, we need to thank all of our scholars that have presented today. Lonnie and Brandon, and also Todd and your partners that are here today. This is an incredible way for us to see what's happening. And it's really at the core of what we do here at IUPUI. So I love the sense of what's happening and the fact that we have our partners here that can help share the word. There are three things that I just sort of wanted to leave you with, and that is that everybody has an opportunity to make sure these kinds of things continue. One is, if you're a faculty member, to really invest some time in yourself, in what you care about and what your field of research is all about. And find community partners who have assets to bring to the table, just as you've seen today. That combination is very difficult to overcome. If you don't find the right partners or you don't have the right assets in the room, you can end up spinning your wheels. So thank you for the exhibit of that activity. The second thing is really invest in your translational team. What kinds of scientists, what kinds of individuals, what kinds of patients are you working on, and invest in collecting the right people? And finally, we'd like for you to also think about investing in programs like this. This particular program that have made these awards is possible through contributions from individuals who have said, I really think that this is the way the future is going. I really think that this is a way that universities and community partners work together to solve problems that they have in common. So you're welcome to join us at any time. The foundation, IU Foundation, maintains a website, and you can go online and search for the Bantz Fellowship Program. And actually, the three programs, two that you've seen today, are on that website. So you can choose one of those if you'd like. But we do invite you to join us and also to share with your other partners, because keeping this kind of research and activity moving forward will make a big difference, not just for those that are here today, but for individuals yet to come and individuals in our community that are just waiting for this kind of assistance. So thank you so much for thinking about that. And I'm going to turn it back over to Steve. And before Steve joins us, don't forget to have your picture taken with your Scholar of the Day. And we have photographers here, and you get to hold the award.
You get to take the awards with you too. And we have boxes for you to get them home safely in whatever pieces. Yeah. So there's a couple of takeaways as we wrap up our time here with the official piece and talk to our webinar audience. And I was hearing thank you, Amy, for encouraging people to continue this because, as Dr. Petronio pointed out to Dr. Bantz, we're not done. We have a lot more work to do. And I appreciate that all of you were talking about the connections and the collaborations that go across here on our campus, but also in our community that involve everybody. It involves our students, our staff, our faculty, our community partners. So we have a lot of work to do. So we're going to move into another piece of the program where you have a chance to talk to these folks. And so how that's going to work is our folks that have gotten awards today are going to, after they get their pictures and blah, blah, they can go next door to the other room where there's a couple of tables set up and there's actually some snacks over there too. So you as a guest will want to go to both places to take advantage of all the different snacks that there might be. But we hope that you'll take a moment, look at the back. Yeah, the prosecutor's like, yeah, I want the snacks. Let's go for the snacks. But we hope that you'll take a chance to ask questions, whatever they may be, and find other partnerships. But we also have some of our scholars here from campus. This is the showcase. So in this room, you've seen already there are 4 posters. And we have with us today Becky, Saptarshi, Broxton, and Eric from different schools with different projects. And we hope that you'll take time to go back and talk to them to learn more about it. What happens every time we do this, Sandra and I always talk about, after all these events, it's amazing to stand back and watch and to see the new connections that people make and where else we go, because we're not done. Right. We have a lot more to do. Yeah, we hope not. We hope not. So we hope that you'll stay connected with us at the Center for Translating Research into Practice. Go to the website and look at the awards because you've only met a few of the people, this year's awardees. You should see all the past awardees and the amazing things that they're doing, the breadth and depth of their work. It goes across all of our schools and programs here at campus. So go find out. There might be something there of interest to you, another opportunity, another connection. You can read all about what's going on. We have an amazing newsletter that comes out once a month. You can see all kinds of things that are happening. You can find out more about some of our scholars by joining our Scholar of the Month conversation series. So once a month, usually the last Friday or so at noon, we have a discussion. It's our way of, we were trying for years to have just a place for people to talk about ideas. And so we've landed on it. It's a virtual event, so everybody can come. So over the lunch hour, it works out great. We have other events, as you heard from Dr. Bantz, so please take advantage of those. Become a TRIP scholar. If you are a faculty member here and you think your work meets this criteria of being translational, it's interdisciplinary, it's generating or using knowledge that makes a difference, please tell us about it so that we can help promote it. So we're so glad that you're here, but it is time for us to get busy. One other thing we like to share is that ScholarWorks, our partnership with the library, is a way that all of us can learn about the work that's going on in the journals. So you don't have to have memberships and subscriptions to all the journals to find out what our scholars are doing. If you go to our website, you can click on it today. We're highlighting Dr. Skaar's, just so you can see this example here on the screen. And if you go to Dr. Skaar's page and click on his lovely picture, it'll bring up a description of his work, and it'll list some of the publications that are available in what we call ScholarWorks. So you can just simply click on this and have access to that journal publication information to learn more. And you can do that for many of our scholars. And it's important to do that. And I have to tell you that we, since we've been doing this partnership since 2010 with the library, we've had 762,535 views and downloads of these articles. And just this year alone, we've had 45,347 views and 100,797 downloads of articles. So that's pretty impressive reach, and that goes across the world. Some of our scholars here on campus are the highlighters of that. So if you want to go see who's hot, it's Carolyn Gentle-Gennedy, Michelle Salyers, Jason Kelly, Sarah Conrath, Barbara Flynn, Devin Hensel, and Jen Shaker. Their work is, people want to know what they're doing. So check it out. You can follow us on social media as well. There's a lot going on. So pick your favorite way. You can do Facebook, you can do Twitter, you can do, I think that's Instagram, I have no idea. And then you can also go to YouTube where you can see whenever we can, we videotape or record these things, or you can see some of those wonderful videos that we put together of some of our scholars. So the time now is, we have until 5 o'clock before we would need to leave this room. So again, please visit all of our scholars and our folks. Get your picture taken, visit, get to know each other, and have a great time. But thank you for coming today and for being a part of this. Let us know how we can help you in any way, whether you're a community partner that wants to get connected to faculty or faculty trying to reach other people. We would like to help you make that happen and celebrate the great work that goes on here at IUPUI. So thank you and go visit.